Imagine for a second you are living in a farmhouse in the absolute middle of nowhere. It is 1922. There is no internet, no cell phones, and the nearest neighbor is half a mile away through thick, dark woods. You start hearing footsteps in your attic at night. You find footprints in the fresh snow leading out of the forest and right up to your front door, but none leading back out. You find a newspaper in your house that you never bought. Your house keys go missing. You tell your neighbors you think someone is living in your walls. A few days later, you and your entire family are dead. But that is not even the scariest part. The scariest part is that after the murders, after your whole family has been wiped out, smoke is still rising from the chimney. The cattle are being fed. Someone is eating your food, sleeping in your bed, and living in the house with your corpses for days. This isn't a horror movie script. This is the Hinterkaifeck Murders, the most chilling, unsolved cold case in German history, and honestly, one of the creepiest mysteries the world has ever seen. We are talking about 6 victims, a killer who ghosted into the night, and a century of questions with 0 answers. So lock your doors, check the attic, and let's get into the nightmare that happened at Hinterkaifeck. To really understand why this case still freaks people out 100 years later, you have to understand the location. Hinterkaifeck wasn't just a farm. It was a fortress of isolation. It was located in Bavaria, Germany, about an hour's drive north of Munich. But in 1922, it might as well have been on another planet. The farm was tucked away near a patch of woods, known locally as the Hexenholz, which literally translates to the witch's wood. That sets the tone right there. It was desolate. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that rings in your ears. Living at the farm was the Gruber family. You had the patriarch, Andreas Gruber, who was 63 years old. His wife, Cecilia, was 72. Then you had their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, who was 35, and her 2 children, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Joseph. Now, I've got to keep it real with you. The Grubers were not exactly the neighbors of the year. Andreas Gruber was known to be a tyrant. He was grumpy, solitary, and notoriously cheap. He didn't get along with the townspeople in the nearby village of Kaifeck. There were some incredibly dark rumors swirling around the family, too. We are talking about rumors of incest between Andreas and his daughter Victoria. In fact, Andreas had actually done prison time years prior for that exact thing, so when people in town talked about the Grubers, it wasn't with warmth, it was with suspicion and a little bit of disgust. They were the outcasts on the edge of the woods, but even outcasts don't deserve what happened to them. The terror at Hinterkaifeck didn't start on the night of the murders. It started months before. This was a slow burn. It was a psychological game of cat and mouse that would drive anyone insane. It started with the maid. The family's original maid, a woman who had worked there for a while, suddenly quit in late 1921. She didn't just put in her 2 weeks' notice. She fled. She told the Grubers and anyone who would listen that the house was haunted. She said she heard voices, strange noises in the dead of night, and felt like she was being watched. She packed her bags and got out of there as fast as she could. Now, looking back, we know it wasn't ghosts. It was something much more tangible and much more dangerous. But the family? They just brushed it off. Andreas Gruber didn't believe in ghosts, and he certainly wasn't going to let some superstitious maid scare him. But then, things got tangible. In March of 1922, just days before the slaughter, a series of events occurred that paints a picture of a killer who was toying with them. It had snowed recently, a fresh white blanket covering the landscape. Andreas went out to check the property and found tracks, human footprints. They started at the edge of the deep, dark forest and walked in a straight line right up to the farmhouse door. Andreas was confused. He expected to see a second set of tracks leading away, assuming maybe a neighbor had come by and left. but there were no tracks leading away. Think about that. Footprints coming in, none going out. Whoever walked up to that house was either still inside or they had found a way to vanish into thin air. Andreas searched the barn, the sheds, the perimeter. He found no one. He spoke to neighbors, asking if anyone had come by. No one had. That night, the noises started again. Footsteps in the attic above their heads. Now, this is an old farmhouse, so creaks and groans are normal. But these were rhythmic, intentional. Andreas grabbed his shotgun and went up to the attic to check. He searched every corner. Nothing. Just dust and shadows. But the feeling of being watched was getting heavier. Then, the keys went missing. The keys to the main house just vanished. They searched everywhere, but they were gone. Then something even stranger happened. Andreas found a newspaper in the house. It was a newspaper from Munich. Now, nobody in the Gruber family subscribed to this paper. The postman hadn't delivered it. So how did a newspaper from a city miles away end up inside their kitchen? It's the kind of detail that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. It implies the killer wasn't just watching from the woods, he was already inside. He was coming in, sitting down, reading the paper, maybe even while the family was out working in the fields. He was making himself at home long before he took their lives. Andreas also noticed scratches on the lock of the tool shed, like someone had been trying to pick it. He told a few neighbors about these things. He told them about the tracks, the attic noises, the missing keys. The neighbors suggested he get a dog or maybe call the police. But Andreas, being the stubborn man he was, refused to get help. He wasn't going to let fear run him off his land. That pride would cost him everything. Let's fast forward to Friday, March 31st, 1922. This is the day the clock ran out. It was a busy day. Ironically, this was the day the new maid arrived. Her name was Maria Baumgartner. She was 44 years old, a hard worker, and she had just arrived at the farm that afternoon. Her sister had dropped her off. Her sister later said that Maria seemed fine, maybe a little nervous about starting a new job, but nothing unusual. Imagine the tragedy of that. Maria walks into this house of horrors, unpacks her bag, and probably thinks, okay, this is a fresh start. She had no idea she had just walked into a death trap. She would be dead within hours of arriving. The afternoon turned into evening. The sun went down, and darkness swallowed the farm. The isolation of Hinterkaifeck became absolute. We don't know the exact minute the violence started, but forensic experts and investigators have pieced together a timeline based on the evidence. It likely happened late in the evening as the family was preparing for bed. The killer was smart. He didn't storm the front door. He didn't break a window. He lured them. The investigation suggests that the killer was hiding in the barn. The barn was connected to the house, which was common in that region, to keep the heat in during winter. Something, maybe a noise, maybe a loose animal, caused the family to go out to the barn one by one. This is where the story gets gruesome, so brace yourselves. The first one to go out was likely the father, Andreas. He walks from the warmth of the kitchen into the cold, dark barn. As soon as he steps through the doorway, he is struck. The weapon was a mattock. If you don't know what a mattock is, it's a heavy farming tool, kind of like a pickaxe. One side has a wide blade for digging, the other side is a pick. It is a brutal, heavy weapon. Andreas is hit in the head, collapsing instantly. The killer drags his body to the side, covering it with hay. Then the killer waits. Next comes the mother, Cecilia. She wonders where her husband is. She calls out his name. No answer. She steps into the barn. The same thing happens. A blow to the head. Silence. Her body is dragged and stacked on top of her husband's. Then comes the daughter, Victoria. Then the 7-year-old granddaughter, little Cecilia. One by one, they are lured into the darkness. One by one, they are slaughtered with terrifying efficiency. There was no screaming, no running, just a silent, methodical elimination of the family. The killer stacked their 4 bodies in the barn, one on top of the other, covering them with hay and an old door hiding the carnage. But the killer wasn't done. There were 2 people left in the house. The killer left the barn and walked into the farmhouse. He went into the maid's room. Maria Baumgartner, on her very first night, was likely unpacking or getting ready for bed. She never stood a chance. He killed her right there in her bedroom. Finally, the killer moved to the last room, the room where 2-year-old Joseph was sleeping in his cot. The killer stood over the sleeping toddler and brought the mattock down. In the span of maybe an hour, 6 people were dead. The bloodline of the Gruber family was erased. The house was silent. Now, usually in a true crime story, this is where the killer flees. They panic. They run to Mexico. They burn the evidence. But Hinterkaifeck is different. This is why this case is legendary. The killer didn't leave. The killer stayed. This is the part that gives me nightmares. For the next 3 to 4 days, the killer lived in the house with the bodies. The 4 bodies were stacked in the barn, freezing in the cold air. The maid was dead in her room. The baby was dead in the cot. And the killer? He was just hanging out. Neighbors later reported seeing smoke rising from the chimney on Saturday and Sunday. The killer was keeping the fire going. He was cooking meals in the kitchen, eating the Grubers' food mere feet away from where he murdered them. He slept in their beds. But it gets weirder. The cattle and the farm animals were fed. When the bodies were eventually found, the animals weren't starving. Someone had gone out to the barn, stepped over the pile of human corpses, and fed the cows. They milked the cows. They looked after the dog. The family dog, a Spitz, was tied up in the barn near the bodies. The killer must have handled the dog, fed it, and kept it quiet. There were even reports that neighbors saw a flashlight moving around the property at night during that weekend. Someone was patrolling the grounds. The sheer audacity of it is mind-blowing. It wasn't just a murder, it was an occupation. It's like the killer wanted to play house, to step into Andreas Gruber's life after taking it from him. Was he looking for something? Was he just crazy? Or was this an act of total dominance? Let's talk about the discovery, because that unfolds in a slow, agonizing way too. Saturday passes, Sunday passes. The town of Kaifeck goes to church. The Grubers are Catholic. They never miss church. But the pew is empty. The neighbors notice. That's odd, they think. Little Kazelia misses school on Monday. That's another red flag. The postman comes by on Saturday and notices the mail from the previous days hasn't been picked up. He leaves the mail on the window ledge and walks away, having no idea that inside the killer might have been watching him through the curtains. On Tuesday, April 4th, 4 days after the murders, a repairman named Albert Hoffner arrives at the farm. He had been scheduled to fix the engine of the food chopper. He shows up, bangs on the door. No answer. He goes around the back. He hears the dog barking inside the barn, screaming its head off. Albert waits for an hour. He eats his lunch on the doorstep. He wanders around the yard. He later told police that he felt like eyes were on him, but he saw no one. Eventually, he decides to just do the job anyway. He goes to the engine room, spends a few hours fixing the machine, and even whistles while he works. Imagine that. He's fixing a machine, whistling a tune, while 6 bodies are rotting a few yards away. When he finishes, he bangs on the door one last time. Still nothing. He spots the dog, now tied up outside, and it looks agitated. Albert eventually leaves, but he stops by the village council leader's house on his way back and mentions, "Hey, the Grubers are ghosting everyone. It's weird up there." This is what finally triggers the check. The neighbors, led by a man named Lorenz Schlittenbauer, remember that name, he is going to be important later, decide to form a search party. Lorenz, along with 2 other men, heads up to the farm. It's late afternoon on April 4th. The sun is starting to dip. The house is silent. No smoke from the chimney now, just the wind howling through the Hexenholz. Lorenz knows the layout of the farm well, too well, some might say. He goes straight to the barn. The door is locked, but they force their way in or find a side entrance. It's dark inside, dust motes floating in the slivers of light. Lorenz moves deeper into the barn. He sees something covered by hay and an old door near the stables. He moves the hay aside. First he sees a foot, then a dress. The horror of what they found in that barn is indescribable. 4 bodies, battered, bloody, stacked like firewood. Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and little Cecilia. The violence was extreme. Their faces were shattered. The men are in shock, but they know there are 2 more people missing. They rush into the farmhouse through the connecting door. It's eerie. The kitchen looks lived in. There's food on the table, remnants of a meal that the victims didn't eat. They go upstairs to the maid's room. They find Maria Baumgartner on her bed, dead. They rush to Victoria's bedroom. They find the little bassinet. Inside is 2-year-old Joseph. He had been struck with such force that the roof of the bassinet was broken. The police were called immediately, but this is 1922 rural Germany. CSI didn't exist. DNA testing didn't exist. The crime scene management was a disaster. Crowds of people from the village hearing the news came up to the farm. They walked through the house, they walked through the barn, they moved things, they touched things. They even ate snacks from the kitchen. The crime scene was contaminated within hours. But even with the contamination, the investigators found clues that made 0 sense. They found that the lock on the barn door had been broken, but not recently. They found the mattock, the murder weapon, hidden in the attic floorboards days later. They found that the cattle had been well cared for. They found bread and meat in the pantry that had been sliced recently, after the family was already dead. And here is one of the most heartbreaking details that came out of the autopsy. The young girl, 7-year-old Cecilia, she didn't die instantly. The autopsy showed that she survived the initial blow. She was lying there in the barn, under the bodies of her mother and grandparents, alive for hours. In her agony and terror, she had torn clumps of hair from her own head. The darkness of that image is too much to process. So, the police have 6 bodies, a contaminated crime scene, and a list of suspects that ranges from traveling vagrants to neighbors. But they have no motive. Was it a robbery? Not really. There was a lot of cash in the house. Andreas was known to keep his life savings hidden in the house. The police found a significant amount of paper marks and gold and silver coins in a drawer. The killer hadn't touched it. If you are robbing a place, you don't leave the gold. You don't stay for 3 days to feed the cows. You grab the loot and you run. So, robbery is out. That leaves something personal, something emotional, or something insane. The police started interviewing everyone. They questioned the postman, the mechanics, the former maids. But all eyes turned to one man. The man who led the search party. The man who seemed to know exactly where to look. Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Let's dig into Lorenz because his connection to this family is messy. Lorenz was a neighbor, but he was also a former suitor of Victoria Gabriel. In fact, they had a relationship. There was a massive dispute over the parentage of the youngest victim, 2-year-old Joseph. Lorenz had initially claimed he was the father, but then he retracted it, claiming that Andreas Gruber, Victoria's own father, was actually the father of the child. Remember the incest rumors? This is where they come into play. So things were messy. Lorenz had been paying child support for Joseph, but he was furious about it. He felt trapped. He felt used. And when the bodies were found, his behavior was sketchy, to say the least. Witnesses said that when the search party entered the barn, Lorenz didn't act like a man stumbling upon a massacre. He acted like a man who knew exactly what he was looking at. While the other men were paralyzed with shock, Lorenz reportedly started moving the bodies. He lifted them up. He checked their faces. The other men screamed at him to stop, to leave the crime scene alone for the police, but he kept going. Why would you touch the bodies? Was he checking to make sure they were actually dead? Or was he looking for something? Then there's the issue of the keys. Remember those missing house keys I told you about? The ones that vanished days before the murders? Well, rumors started flying that Lorenz had a way to get into that house. Some people speculated he stole the keys or had a spare. When the police questioned him, he had answers, but they were never quite solid enough to clear his name completely, yet never damning enough to arrest him. He claimed he moved the bodies because he was looking for his son, young Joseph. But here is the detail that makes Lorenz look incredibly guilty. When the police finally arrived and tried to open the front door to the farmhouse, it was locked. But moments later, after Lorenz had been wandering around, the door was suddenly unlocked. Did he use the missing key to open it? Lorenz Schlittenbauer lived the rest of his life in the shadow of these accusations. He sued people for slander who called him the murderer. He won some of those cases, but the cloud never lifted. He died in 1941, taking his secrets to the grave. But if it wasn't the jealous ex-lover, who was it? There is another theory that is straight out of a Hollywood thriller. The theory of the ghost soldier. Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel, was supposedly killed in World War I in 1914. His body was never recovered, but his fellow soldiers swore he died in a trench in France. But what if he didn't? Some people believe Carl Gabriel faked his death or survived the war and returned home, only to find his wife pregnant with her own father's child. Imagine the rage. Imagine the betrayal. A soldier, broken by war, coming home to find his family involved in incest and scandal. This theory explains the brutality. It explains why the money wasn't taken. This was a crime of passion, of hate. It was about wiping out a family that had sinned. It also explains how the killer knew the layout of the farm and felt comfortable enough to stay there for days. He wasn't a stranger. He was the master of the house, reclaiming his territory. Years later, people claimed they met a man in Russia who said he was the killer of Hinterkaifeck. But like everything else in this case, it was just smoke. No proof. Then there were the Gump brothers, notorious criminals in the area. There was a rumor that the Grubers were hoarding gold. Maybe a robbery gone wrong. But again, why leave the money? Why feed the cows? Robbers don't act like caretakers. The investigation dragged on for years. They interviewed over 100 suspects. They even brought in psychics. They decapitated the corpses. Yes, you heard that right. The police removed the heads of the victims and sent them to Munich to be examined by clairvoyants to see if the dead could speak. Spoiler alert, they didn't. And in a final, cruel twist of fate, those skulls were kept in a museum in Munich and were likely destroyed during the Allied bombings in World War II. So literally, every piece of physical evidence is gone. In 1923, a year after the murders, the neighbors decided they'd had enough of the murder farm. They tore Hinterkaifeck down. They demolished the house, the barn, everything. They wanted to erase the evil from the landscape. While they were tearing it down, they found the mattock, the murder weapon, hidden in the attic, tucked under the floorboards near the chimney. It confirmed what everyone feared. The killer had been in the attic. He had been living above their heads, listening to them breathe, waiting for the perfect moment. Today, there is nothing left at Hinterkaifeck but a shrine. A small gray memorial stands in the middle of a flat green field. It lists the names of the 6 victims: Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, Kazilia, Joseph, and Maria. People still visit the site. They say it feels heavy there, cold. Even in the summer, the air feels different. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved. We will likely never know who walked out of the witch's wood that night. We will never know who sat by the fire, eating the family's bread while their bodies froze in the barn. Was it the jealous neighbor, the returning soldier, or a wandering madman who just happened to stumble upon a house in the middle of nowhere? The scary part isn't just the death, it's the intimacy of it. The killer didn't just take their lives, he took their home. He tried on their existence for size, and when he was done playing house, he simply walked back into the woods, leaving footprints that led nowhere, disappearing into the dark, never to be seen again. So tonight, when you hear a floorboard creak upstairs, or you can't find your keys, or you see a footprint in the yard that you don't recognize, just remember, sometimes the monster isn't under the bed. Sometimes he's already in the house, just waiting for you to fall asleep.